Welcome back to Books Are My Third Place, your literary lifestyle haven. Don't forget to subscribe.
I am so excited to be here with an award-winning voice actor, Chris Tester, who actually brought to life a project that I've had for the last 2 years for the book community. I'm so excited because by the time you guys see this video, it will actually be released. And hopefully you all love it. So, Chris, thank you so much for being here. I'm excited to talk about your voice acting journey today.
No, thank you, Ashley, for having me.
Welcome.
Thank you. There's the microphone just to prove that I do what I claim
you are
I do.
legit.
Yeah, exactly.
So I want to start off with what your earliest memory was with doing any sort of voicing of a character, or
Sure.
Did you always know that you wanted to be a voice actor?
No, not at all. So I did know from the age of 13 that I wanted to be an actor. And I went about that in earnest after I was at university in the UK. So I went to drama school. I went to a place called the Royal Central School of Speech and Drama, which is where Andrew Garfield, Judi Dench, Laurence Olivier, Kit Harington, aka Jon Snow, was in my year. So it was a great place to train. And then for about 12 years, I was a theatre actor, almost exclusively. And I did little bits of voiceover, but the very first bit of voiceover that I did was for a video game called Dark Souls, playing a half-man, half-scorpion. I thought that this half-man, half-scorpion would have some kind of monster voice. So I went into my audition having done all of this preparation, and then they were just like, no, just do your natural thing. Apparently this half-man, half-scorpion sounds exactly like me. So that was my first voiceover job, and then I've been kind of jumping from one genre to another ever since. So that was back in 2012, 2013.
Wow.
And then I was full-time with voice acting since 2017.
That just reminded me of The Mummy.
Yeah.
Scorpion King, like those kind of vibes.
Yeah. So it was really a three-dimensional kind of guy, as well as being able to scream and shoot venom at people.
And coming from being able to attend it sounds like such an incredible school with a lot of really amazing talent, do you have people that you particularly look up to in the voice acting world, or people that
in
you
the
get
voice
inspiration
acting world? I mean, yes, now more so increasingly. I think a very obvious touchstone for a lot of people who are interested in doing video games, especially this guy called Troy Baker. But he has really been one of the first actors who is a voice actor as opposed to someone who just had a nice voice. He kind of straddles the divide between someone who is vocally incredibly transformative. So he recently played Indiana Jones in this latest game, where he was, so he had to basically do a Harrison Ford homage, but at the same time really acted. And he was also the actor who originated the part of Joel in The Last of Us, the video game, before it was, made into an HBO series. And The Last of Us is seen as one of the kind of like the standout transitional points where video game acting became serious, and it became about the gravitas and the cinematics and the emotion underneath, rather than making Scorpion King noises necessarily. So Troy Baker, I think, has always been, a shining example to me. And then as I've got into the audiobook genre, I think Michael Kramer and Kate Redding, I think it is, their duo are incredibly inspiring to me as well. I mean, the more I dig into kind of audiobooks, the more people I really, are wowed by the skill sets that are out there. But I'd say kind of Troy and those two are the most standout ones to me.
Have you read all of Stormlight Archive?
No, I've not.
Have you finished it?
No. I have listened to the very first book, and that's it. That is partly because of my own tardiness, but it's partly because, I like doing kind of readings from material completely cold without knowing what's going on, which is my own perverse way of practicing my craft.
It's so good. I got completely sucked into the Cosmere, total sidetrack, but it's just such an incredible worlds that he's built, and I love those audiobooks in particular. Like, they're so great.
They complement each other so well.
Yeah, I'm like on Oathbringer, so I still have several to go, but
it'll never end.
No, except for I think
Guaranteed.
it's like 10 years until we get the next set of them.
God,
which is because he has all these
work.
Other plans for all these other books that he's writing. I don't know. He's the most prolific writer. It's crazy. So hopefully nothing ever happens to Michael Kramer, right?
No.
It's like, we
Well,
need
no,
you.
no, definitely. I mean, or if they decide
Yeah.
to pass the baton on at some point, then,
Yeah.
I'm readily available. But
Perfect.
we'll see. I have done
Um,
examples of my work are around, and my rates are competitive.
Love it. Love it. What is kind of the dream audiobook role for you?
It varies. It's the one I haven't found yet. So a lot of the audiobooks that have come my way are via self-published authors. And that's been very exciting for me because, I mean, without going on too much of a segue, that up until about a year and a half ago, I vowed that I would not touch audiobooks with a barge pole because they are so much work. And it's great. You like the actual work itself. I'm very excited about. It's a challenge. You're basically a one-person play, but especially in the UK, rates for audiobooks are really low. They're roughly about a half to a third of what they are in the US market as an equivalence. But the business side of my brain goes, this is a loss-making exercise. Essentially, I can do like an explainer video, and that's like $300, $500, $1,000 in about 10 minutes. If I get that gig, or, I can be recording a 10-hour book, which maybe takes about 30 to 40 hours to actually do, and get a fraction of that. So that's always been kind of like one of the reasons why I haven't gone anywhere near it. But then when the social media thing kind of like kicked off, a lot of self-published authors approached me that were based in the US, where the rates are a lot more kind of competitive. And that means that I've been able to kind of like essentially take risks with these picks because I'm really passionate about the writing, and that's been a whole variety of different genres. So rather than going, this is the author that I would definitely kind of like work with, everything has been a really nice surprise. So I've gone from something like Charles Dickens to something like there's A Crown of Star and Ash by Victoria Taylor, which is probably the closest I've come to the ACOTAR realm. It's kind of a little Game of Thrones
side of things.
but but with the kind of like ACOTAR vibes as well. To doing, audio drama stuff with graphic audio like Red Rising series, Iron Gold, and then Warhammer as well. So they've all been completely different, and then doing fantasy stuff, historical epic kind of stuff, and they all demand something different of me. So I'm up for the challenge of that rather than going, this is the niche that I inhabit, because you want to do two things. On the one hand, the market finds it kind of useful for you to know what you think you're good at so you can specialize in it. Whereas my approach is generally not that I want to be, jack of all trades and master of none, but each one will give me a different thing. So, if you can find the vulnerability in something like Charles Dickens, what happens if you take the vulnerability and you place it in ACOTAR, or if you place it in Warhammer? That kind of thing.
Yeah. So speaking of all these different roles, how do you have any specific exercises that you do to sort of embody a character, or things you do to get in character to prep you?
Yeah. I mean, I just do a series of funny voices and see what sticks. Obviously, like a real professional would. I mean, there are lots of different approaches, and text analysis and psychologically evaluating stuff. But I use really a thing called LARB movement exercises, which you can also inhabit kind of vocally to completely bastardize and simplify the system. What that means is that, are you slow or fast? Are you direct or indirect? There are all of these kind of like different technical qualities that you can give a character from which you can then start to layer things on. So this it's something that you start first physically to then kind of find the voice for it, rather than going, okay, this is kind of what the voice is supposed to be like, and then I'll find what the character is from the voice. So how they hold themselves, where they hold their chest, do they lead from their chin, from their forehead, from their torso, from their belly, that kind of thing. So where the weight is, and that kind of gives you a sense of what their breathing pattern will be like. And then so from that stage, you kind of layer it on and on and on, at the same time as doing some form of psychological analysis to see what is it that they want, how do they relate to the world around them. Obviously, if there's a character who's only in it for about 3 lines, you're going to be operating in more broad strokes, but then it's seeing also how those character journeys might change. Characters start in one stage, and hopefully through the course of an interesting narrative, they change and develop. So knowing to be able to have like, okay, emotionally, I know they go from really, really hard, to really kind of vulnerable, to really, really angry. But is there a technical journey, therefore? So when they're very, very hard, are they kind of like pressing? When they're more vulnerable, are they more kind of, do they have more of a kind of a ringing quality, which can be carried in the physicality and therefore the voice? So that's the framework that I use, and I put it all out in a spreadsheet. And generally, because spreadsheets are always lovely. And I think I also make sure that I record a sample of each character's voice.
So then you can remember if you have to.
Yeah, because then you're like, oh, little Jimmy hasn't been here in like 25 hours. How does he sound? Oh, apparently he's Welsh. I've forgotten about that. There we are. Yeah.
Yeah, that continuity, I think, between, especially for a novel when you have a ton of, an ensemble cast and a ton of different characters that you're trying to switch voices and do different things for, I would imagine. I didn't even think about like creating the specific samples so you don't forget.
I mean, like a good entrepreneur, I pay someone to do this for me quite often in terms of there are professional preppers, people who read audiobooks for audiobook narrators, and then they will do character analysis. They will they will color code the script for you, and they will have various character notes. Maybe they'll highlight, someone says an entire speech and then they said quietly through tears. And it's only once you get to the end of the speech that you go, okay, and then have to do it again. So they'll highlight that for you so that you can then go back and already by seeing it in your peripheral vision, okay, it's got to be through tears and that kind of thing. Yeah. What that does, obviously, I still read the book and all their notes before I then reread it. But paying someone to do that means that you don't have to spend the time annotating it. So, yeah, those people are worth their weight in gold.
I feel like the book community doesn't even know that these kind of jobs exist. So, y'all out there that are looking. That sounds incredible. Yeah.
Yeah. And quite often they're people who are just fans of particular types of books. Or just like reading. Some people really enjoy the variety, and some people say, I prep particular types of books, so come to me when you next have a kind of a romance thing or a historical thing or a factual thing. So I've got about 3 preppers that I know, and they're kind of on rotation depending on who is available. And same thing in terms of with the editing. So again, having people on either end of the production scale is really, really useful, because generally when you're working with publishers, they may do a lot of the prep for you and a lot of the editing for you. Some of them don't, but some of them do. But for self-published stuff, I've got my own kind of like chain of production kind of ready to go as and when required.
Wait, I feel like this is an interesting one. It's not on our list of questions, but I do think it's very interesting because Audible's been posting a bunch about, I don't know if you've seen these videos, but it kind of has the book community in an uproar, because most of us that listen to audiobooks don't listen to them at one-time speed. Like, we all speed them up. And as a narrator, do you find that upsetting to you that we speed your voice up, or do you intentionally speak audiobooks slower? Or like, I'm just curious.
You intentionally speak audiobooks slower. And it's something that I generally struggle with. With my sight reading, I want to be in the moment, but when I have worked with coaches in the past and everything, they don't say you've got to be 0.75 times speed,
like
but
slow-mo.
But there is that. I think there are times where it can be super valuable for people to use their imagination and really properly see what's happening. But I think this is where, as the art form develops, we're learning to have to kind of maybe possibly adapt. So maybe people don't need quite so long to fully envisage a scene actually happening that they do. So it's very interesting in some of the kind of social media stuff that I do. I do not go slow. It's not cinematic. It's innately theatrical to a degree what I'm doing, but it is kind of like happening more in kind of the real time. Whereas depending on the material as well, you do tend to go a little bit slower just so that there are those kind of beats. But it's something, in all honesty, that I discuss with each editor. For example, with Warhammer, where it's hyper-masculine and all of this testosterone that is going on, quite often, there's obviously something dramatic happening. And so you're usually speeding through a lot of that stuff.
And speaking of social, I guess that's a good segue. And how did you start posting on TikTok and kind of doing these monologues and
pieces? Because of my mum. There you go.
Okay.
There's the unexpected answer. Yeah. Okay. So without going like, oh, woe is me, because it's not that sad really. But like, my mum can never use FaceTime. So I can't see her when I call her, which I call her every evening. Yeah, like a good son. Exactly. And I go down and see her every 5 to 6 weeks. It's all good. But obviously she's still kind of curious about what my day-to-day life is and keeps asking me questions and all of that kind of stuff, which is great, but was even more important when my dad passed away a few years ago. And so I thought, okay, I can't share a lot of the voiceover work that I actually record because it's under NDA, confidentiality, and all of that kind of stuff. And also, I thought I'm not really doing all of the things that I as an actor should be doing, which is warming up every day, both vocally and emotionally, without getting too like touchy-feely about it. But quite often my approach to voiceover back when I was a smoker was to have a black coffee and cigarette. That's my warm-up. Let's go. And I was like, okay, well, first of all, it's not, premature death's never a good thing.
Right. No, definitely not.
So that's habit number one that needed to stop, which it has. Okay, I need to feel a bit more like an artist and a bit more creative. So I started with a laundry list of all of the speeches that I was too old or to play from theatre. Started with that, and I recorded them and I posted them on TikTok randomly and Instagram, because my mum is on Instagram, just so she could see it. And it was a way of keeping myself accountable for my work. And it's like, if people know that I'm posting this, and I used to post it maybe like twice, 3 times a week, and my mum would give me suggestions. First and foremost,
as every mom does.
Yeah,
yes.
like, oh, maybe you should do, Richard II or Richard III or some, this poem from Seamus Heaney or whatever. So we started with that. And then, to cut a long story short, a particular speech went viral, and it was not what I expected to go viral at all. It was an amazing speech, but by a wonderful friend and writer, a guy called Ross McGregor, who basically used to be the director and writer of the theatre company that I was a producer of. He had written this speech. It was an amazing speech. It was from the perspective of the Greek god Zeus, but he's created the internet. He's mastered the algorithm. This is how he is controlling everybody as a god. It was a kind of stream of consciousness monologue that lasted 5 minutes. And it got 300,000 views. And off of the back of that, it started to build, and then people started suggesting things.
Different things for you.
Yeah, exactly. And so I've gone through various different cycles, like anime, and then Doctor Who, and then, we've gone through pretty much anything and everything. So I've been doing it now for about 2.5 years, I would say. Yeah, so between 4 and 5 times a week. But it's my way of warming up. So rather than go like, oh, I've got to create content, it's like, keeping myself accountable. My mum knows what I'm up to a little bit. And, it's just a nice way to kind of connect with the voice and connect with the emotional thing before I then do the work that pays the bills.
So in that same vein, did someone suggest to you to do the Rhysand monologues, or how did you discover Booktok, or did Booktok discover you? Is that
Booktok definitely discovered me. I think I might have tried to use the hashtag in a couple of but kind of going, I don't know. So that's like people who like books, right? I didn't know quite how specific, quite how definitive a niche it is. So yes, people have suggested material from things like ACOTAR previously, but they've suggested more stuff in the realm of chapter 55 as opposed to 54. And I was like, I don't know. First of all, I don't know how that's going to go down with my mum.
Yeah.
I'll be honest. I mean, she's a very open-minded person. It's great. She might appreciate it. She might appreciate it too much. I don't know if I'm ready for that conversation with her. It's okay. We're all fine. So I was a bit like, I don't know. Because the vast majority of stuff that people suggest, the whole idea is that I'm not trying to recreate what was there before. And so the less I know about the material, the better. Because the whole idea is that I literally read it once, I press record, and then I do it.
And then
because the whole idea is that in audiobooks, you only ever really read it once, and then you record it, albeit with some preparation. But also in like video games, you're cold reading everything. You almost never get the script. I have never got a video game script in advance. You literally get it.
Oh, wow.
You've been maybe told, like, you're in a bunker. You're talking to your best friend. The good directors will give you context, but it's like, and here are the lines. And you don't even get to read them before you say them. There was one video game that I recorded where I didn't even realize that I could be a love interest for the player until we had recorded 8 hours. And it was like, so there's a romancing line. And they were like,
should I have done that differently?
I was like, okay, so I'm not reevaluating my old previous 8 hours of choices and worrying now. But great, it was fine. You got to trust the director in that stage. So because it's kind of cold reading, that's what I go for. And with the ACOTAR stuff,
Yeah.
it was just like, regardless of like whether or not I would ever read it myself, I don't know. But the writing connected with me. I thought it was really good writing, and there was just something in there. I also thought it was a technical challenge because he is just talking and talking and talking and talking and talking,
Right.
and kind of going, right. So you've got to find the why. Why is he giving everything out now? And because I'm not reading the entire book and going, okay, his reasons for this and what's just happened is everything.
Yeah.
It's completely up to me. So the actor's job is to fill in the blanks and then take an educated guess. And I think it's always a really good indication of great writing is that, my reasons, my rationale, my logic behind it that I've justified for myself could be completely wrong. But as long as the emotional place is right or somewhere close to being right, then the words do the work and hopefully it comes together, which...
Yeah. Well, and I think you've seen it. It has, like, the response. I think people are like absolutely loving what you've
it's
created.
really nice comments. So that's been great.
I think the other thing is there's definitely different facets of Booktok, and I would say the spicy side definitely like is loud, and we love them. They're having fun, but there are a lot of us that do read a lot of other things as well as enjoying romance. And I think the other thing is that, like what you were saying of connecting to, like, there's tons of people out there doing like, all the spicy bits are like the fun little one-off two-word things, and it's awesome. But there is a need for some of those longer, more emotionally connecting.
Well, they serve different
they serve different kind of like purposes. Very often.
Yeah, no, totally. And I would say that those people who can just like carry off that particular, I'm not even going to attempt whatever is that kind of thing. I'm also like 20 years too old, and I don't have the bone structure for it. We're not doing that, but to try and connect on it in a different way and go like, that's the other appeal, because that's part of the appeal of the character, is that he can pull all the sexy moves and be dark and brooding and mysterious and all of that kind of stuff, but at the same time with her can share that vulnerability.
He has emotional intelligence, which is rare.
Exactly. So it's like, that's both. He can smolder and at the same time reveal something of himself, metaphorically as well as literally, I'm sure. Sorry.
No, the Booktok will love that. No, but it's true though. I think there are a lot of those, and Sarah J. Maas is really great at this. And I think obviously you've probably seen Rebecca Yarros on your For You page as well, if you've been doing ACOTAR content, and with Onyx Storm just coming out. And I think the way that they write these characters, they do have all the like, they are very much written for the female gaze, and they do have all of these attributes and all these things, and they're hot, but it is ultimately about their emotional intelligence and like how they can be vulnerable, even though they're this, big bad strong warrior. It's about having that.
I mean,
those
that's very
that's
very refreshing from someone who's done a lot of stuff in the Warhammer world, where it's all very hyper masculine, but also everybody has daddy issues. Everybody's like, I was not loved enough. I mean, it's literally it's daddy issues, the movie. That's why Amazon are making it. That's why Henry Cavill is going to be such a. I mean, that's the amazing thing about it as well, is that you can actually find, you think it's this hyper masculine or a hyper feminine thing, but again. There is those glimmers. It's the glimmer, which is what makes it from something that is a cheap, disposable piece of fun into something that like people become massively infatuated with and invested in. It's because there's something else in additional to the characters, like with the Warhammer Space Marines, smacking each other and, blowing each other up and killing the orcs and all of the fun kind of stuff. It's kind of, it can verge on pantomime sometimes, and it knows it. But it's also dealing with incredibly dark themes and all of that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
But it's also incredibly human in its best moments. And so that's been the wonderful thing from this exercise, is that I discovered more of that from Warhammer, but then to immediately go like, okay, I'm not now a Warhammer creator, but if people can continue to suggest stuff from ACOTAR or any other of these realms of books where the writing stands up, then that's a wonderful thing as an actor to be able to kind of like excavate, because it's not about trying to do a voice. It's about connecting about what makes this moment kind of special, and connecting with someone and saying, I am here for you, and I have fucked up and I have done X, Y, and Z thing wrong. But still, I am here for you, and I will sacrifice absolutely everything, and I will have continued is an amazing moment.
Well, I think there's so many books that are still quite popular on Booktok that are not in necessarily romance, I would say, but just like really beautifully written. I think The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue is one of them. I don't know if anybody has suggested that one to you.
No,
but
not
there's
yet.
some
No.
absolutely gorgeous, right? Like I read that book, I think 2.5 years ago, and I still think about it weekly. Like they're just
This is
the
me
way
like a
that
real
it was written and yeah, I could pull some quotes for you, but it's really just beautiful. And it's kind of interesting in the way that it's written because it's slow. It's not a quick read. The pacing is very slow. And then you end up with like a couple of POVs at the end where somebody described it almost as like a piano piece where it's like you have staccato and then you have like these other like slower pieces. It's meant to be on purpose that way. Like it's meant to read slow. You're meant to have that kind of language
because then
journey.
it's those little kind of like subtle variances within a rhythm you start to appreciate that much more keenly, and
exactly.
that kind of loops back to my methodology of the Laban stuff as well. It's kind of having that kind of heightened awareness of what is physically happening in the sensorial. It all comes down to the rhythm of the different lives, and each character has to have slightly different kind of like rhythm and way and musicality of speaking. All of those kind of things kind of has to happen. Even if, in the audiobook world, and this is a taste thing, some people go like, oh, when you're transformative, it's great. Whereas other people are like, actually, subtle variance is what I'm about. And for me, as a narrator, you need to be, first of all, aware of what your skill set is, but also what is appropriate for the book in hand. If you like, your characterizations mean that everybody is a little bit heightened, a little bit unbelievable, a little bit too verging on caricature or anything, then that can get in the way of a piece. Whereas if you're doing, I don't know, some Charles Dickens where there are some grotesques, then that's part of the kind of the fun and the allure of it at the same time.
So I guess that's kind of a fun little segue. What was your first thought when I asked you to be part of creating the Book Boyfriend Hotline?
Like, hell yeah, shamelessly. I mean, I think it was as soon as you said that at least 6 figures. And I was like, great. Yeah, sure, Ashley. You just Venmo me
make that happen.
Yeah. So I'm just waiting for that to
Everybody
clear.
on Booktok donates $1 and then we're good. Like,
no. that kind of like works. Yeah, I mean, no, I'm always up for I was just going to be like a bit like the libertine guy. I'm up for anything all of the time. Yeah. But yeah, I mean, in terms of like meeting new material and just playing around and, seeing if anybody appreciates it, I'm like, yeah, great.
I'm so excited for people to listen to this because I think I told you when I first sent back, like after you sent the first clips, there was one in particular that like actually did bring some tears to my eyes just because the book is like so emotional and people are very emotionally invested in the book. And I don't know anybody that likes the book that didn't cry while reading it. And so I'm very excited to make people cry. It'll be great.
No, but no, I mean, well, thank you for the invitation to play. But I mean, that is fundamentally what I enjoy about the job. It's kind of seeing, these kind of like little glimpses into other kind of stories that I've not discovered yet and going, oh, wow, this would be exciting. This is interesting. So yeah, love it.
Yeah. So, and what's next? Like, have you thought about like what you want to do?
What I want to do all the time. What am I doing with my life? I mean, continuing on, I think working with interesting people on interesting things. I'm kind of like, practically right now, I'm quite happy to continue with doing more voice acting specifically. And I think working increasingly in audiobooks, working with authors, I think being able to work with authors over a longer period of time, so over multiple books, is something that I would love to be able to do, because then you get a real sense of, working as a team to help flesh out a universe a little bit more. I mean, obviously, they're driving absolutely everything in terms of the characters and the plot and the writing and all of that kind of stuff. But obviously, then what I bring to it additionally is of marginal importance. But, the feeling that you can take a character on a longer arc is what really kind of like excites me. But in terms of, because I've been quite selective in terms of the audiobooks that I take on. Right. And also I only started doing audiobooks about 18 months ago.
Okay, so super recent. Yeah.
Bizarrely, what first got me involved in audiobooks was I got a random phone call from the Cayman Islands, and I got that on my phone and I was like, I really shouldn't probably answer this. It's some kind of crazy scam, but I've never had a scam phone call from the Cayman Islands before. So I thought, yeah, sure, I'll answer. I answered it, and it was this lovely gentleman who was like, I've written this book about horse racing. I wrote it back in the 80s, and it's sort of as the Bible about the history of horse racing and horse breeding.
Oh my gosh.
I found you on the internet. Would you like to narrate it? And he was like, name your price. And I thought, okay, what's 5 times the industry minimum? And said that. And he was like, yep. I was like, damn.
Oh my gosh. No way.
Yeah. So
then you
that
had to do it.
Yeah. Then I was like, I better do this. And it was actually fascinating. Because it's actually culturally about how a whole industry changed because of different countries' involvement and new money into it. Anyway, I'm not going to go on that.
No, I love that. I grew up riding horses, and my dad was a veterinarian and worked on
so it was a real insight.
So really cool.
And the people who are actually working with the horses. I found it actually really kind of like fascinating. And
it is super fascinating.
And once I'd done 14 hours of that, I was like, okay, well, maybe I can do other stuff now.
And you're an expert on horse racing now.
Oh,
right?
Obviously. Yeah, sure.
Do you retain, actually, that's a fun question. Do you feel like you retain the material that you end up reading, or you're like,
no.
Okay, I've read it, now it's out?
It's out. It's like, I mean, characters stay with you, sure, by all means, but it's terrible how, because you only actually read the material about 3 times, and my memory is bad enough because it's then I've got very much a finite amount of memory, and then there's another 2 or 3 books coming down the barrel as well, hopefully, touch wood. So my brain goes like, okay, we don't need to retain absolutely every detail now. So general arcs and all of those kind of things. And I love being able to do factual books as well and learning stuff as I go. That was one of the things that fascinated me about being a stage actor. I did play about Lance Armstrong, for example. And that was fascinating because I wasn't invested in the whole cycling and the peloton or anything until I did a play about it and had to do all of the research about the character and that kind of thing. So that is a kind of a fascinating thing to do. But I don't retain anything.
Yeah.
So it's just terrible.
Oh, that's such an interesting point because I feel like I hear this from actors all the time in interviews where they are talking about like how every new film or play, they acquire some new skill because they've had to do the research around the characters, and especially when it's like biopics or anything like that. But it's so fascinating. Do you think you would envision yourself having to do that for books ever? Or
I mean, certainly with kind of
to help you understand the characters, or
I mean, less, I think, in terms of practical skills, though. I think kind of doing some research, I think, is integral on those kind of things. If kind of like credibility is a huge kind of like issue, understanding that about a character, doing a bit more kind of like background research so that everything that you say is grounded is really useful. And then there's just a much more kind of mundane practicality of like an accent. I am not someone who's just got like a natural ear for all accents. I've got about 7, some of which are stronger than others, as I've already talked to you about in terms of even with general American. Certain characters, it's fine, but, I normally need to recheck and adjust certain sounds and that kind of thing. But, you'll suddenly go like, oh, there's a Scots person in this one. No one flagged that up about me or asked me about the Scottish accent I don't have. So I better work on that. And so there is that kind of like practical skill as well, which is pretty mundane, but, part of the job.
Well, for any authors that do want to work with you, where can they find you?
Sure. So my website is called naturallyrp.co.uk. RP as in like my native accent, not the only accent I can do, but my native accent is received pronunciation. So hence the Naturally RP. And there's a contact form there that if there's ever an inquiry, people can reach out and they can send a little excerpt of script along so that they can hear a little bit. Normally what I advise is that like reaching out with a little sample so that they can hear it. And, talking about rates, duration of how long the book is really useful. But then I'd say to any author, make sure that you listen to at least 3 or 4 different people reading at least 5 minutes, or if not, 5 to 10 minutes, depending on if there are certain characters that you need to hear, or, a bit of third person as opposed to first person or something like that, I think is always kind of important because you will never know what it actually sounds like in someone else's voice until you've heard it. And then you can compare and contrast and see which one is most attractive to you.
Resonates the most.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Chris, thank you so much for doing this. This was so much fun. Fascinating to get into the mind of a voice actor and learn more. I actually learned a bunch of things that I didn't know. So it was super, super fun. And hopefully everybody will get to enjoy more of your voice acting skills.
All recommendations are always
Boyfriend
welcome.
Hotline. It'll be great.
Yeah. Great.
All right, perfect.
Thanks so much for watching, and make sure you subscribe.